Hey everyone, I wanted to make a video kind of speaking to the contrast between a traditional indigenous Kambo experience versus a more modern Western influenced experience. And I see a lot of misinformation that circulates around the Kambo field in general, but especially around indigenous culture and ritualistic traditions that pertain to the act of receiving Kambo. So I want to also include the notion that there are a number of different communities and tribes in the Amazon that have used this medicine, and each village, each community is going to have their own style that they work with this medicine. So it's very similar to saying, okay, well, what is the tradition of Americans for Christmas? And well, that's going to vary from household to household, right? Perhaps your tradition in your family is to make cookies on Christmas Eve, or to decorate the tree, or whatever it may be. It's going to be different. So just like with other traditions, in indigenous traditions, there's a lot of variety and variation amongst different communities. So there is no blanket traditional way of doing any of it. However, the vast majority of the experiences that I've had in the jungle with indigenous communities is that traditionally there was no ritual with Kambo. There was no ceremony. There was no sacred songs. There was no prayer. There was really no ritualistic element to it at all. It was very much, you sit on a log, they burn you, they put it on, and you're on your own. There's no one there really looking after you. I mean, I guess they are kind of looking after each other, but you're very much on your own journey, and there's not even a practitioner to wipe your medicine off of you. That's fully up to you when you decide that you're done. There's no one there to help you to the bathroom. It's very casual. And so there's this misconception, I think, in the Kambo world that there's like this rich traditional culture and artism around the act of serving Kambo, and there's not. And I think that actually has come from, ayahuasca has a very rich tradition in, song and shamanic practices and spirituality, but we just don't see that in the world of Kambo. And so, unfortunately, that understanding of ayahuasca and other shamanic medicines has been kind of applied to Kambo in a false way that's not true. And this doesn't mean that I don't think that those elements are valuable. It's just that they're not technically traditional. So when people can get dogmatic about, I want to do it the traditional way, or, be traditional, or be served traditional, it's important to recognize that there's a lot that has evolved from the modern day use of Kambo in Western cultures. So that brings me to, what does it typically look like in Western cultures? Well, these days there is a tremendous amount of neo-spiritual adaptation and elements of ritual and music and prayer and intention setting and ceremony. And that's not traditional, but it's so valuable. And I think as a Western culture, we are craving a connection and opportunity to feel spiritual, to witness ourselves in some sort of devotional spiritual practice. And so I think that the container of a ceremonial ritual is tremendously valuable for the people that are practicing Kambo all over the world, whether they're Western, whether they're indigenous. I think there's so much merit to the practice of creating an intentional container and then going through an experience as part of that container. So I don't think that it's wrong or bad that the practice of Kambo is evolving to include these ritualistic elements. I think it's part of the natural innovative process that happens in anything in this world. And with that being said, I think it's also important to look at what the needs are of the individual or the community that you're serving. For example, I would ask, is it appropriate to serve a Westerner within the context of a traditional teaching or strategy of working with the medicine? And personally, I don't think it is, because the lifestyle, the culture, the physiology of a Westerner as a person is going to be drastically different than a Matse's, 40-year-old man who has been taking Kambo since he was 3 years old routinely and never had antibiotics in his life, never eaten genetically modified food or whatever. Their microbiomes are going to be completely different. Their physiology is going to be different. Their genetics are different. Their cultural context is different. And so you cannot approach that person, that 40-year-old Matse man, in the same way that you can approach a 40-year-old obese man with diabetes in the US. So for that reason, I think it's really important that we modernize and adapt Kambo practices to make sense for how we're using them now. This medicine has left the jungle, for better or for worse, and so we need to make sure that we're gracefully and intelligently, with discernment, integrating it into a culture that it's going to make sense in the context of that culture and what the Western needs might be and how those are different than a traditional indigenous community member's needs. So there's no wrong or right way, whether you want to do something traditional or more neo-spiritual. It's just a matter of understanding the benefits and the applications of each so that you can make the best decision for you and your clients.